When you share your story with people that you care about, they can see themselves within you, and they can understand. Oh, I'm not alone. I'm not. And some people even I've had conversations with people that are like, I thought I was crazy.
Yeah.
And like when they realize like, oh wait, yeah, you also feel that, like, yeah, like a lot of men do. We just don't talk about it.
Especially when you're talking about the story, right? And you were saying, how do you know, like, what to start with? Where do you share? Um, like you said, I would start with like the facts of the situation, what I actually went through. You know, like even when we talked before, like starting with, you know, your family upbringing, who was in your household, where did you grow up? Did you move a lot? Who was in your household? Where did you go to school? All those types of things. And then over time, you start to learn the language. Like when I said earlier, we tend to talk around the things. Over time, you start to learn, right? You start to be able to pinpoint what was the actual emotion. So to try to give an example, I had a client who we were trying to work on building emotional language, right? And they were talking about getting nervous a lot. They would basically describe the physiological symptoms. They would say like, you know, I would get like this like twisting in my stomach and my heart would start beating and I'd start sweating a little bit. And this is why I don't want to open up to my girl, because I'm concerned like how she's going to react. I want to tell her things, but then I'm also afraid. And by the way, this person is 17. So right in my demographic of like young person trying to intervene, you know, early on, right? And as I'm listening to this person describe more and more, I'm like, you know, and I never assume. I never like to assume how somebody feels. I always want to inquire and then confirm. And I'm like, you know, it sounds like you're afraid they're going to abandon you if you were to be honest. And they just kind of sat with it for a little bit. And, you know, then they kind of just nodded their head. And I was like, you know, a lot of men, we have that issue. Because again, that's like the duality of what we experience. You know, it's like, again, we get so many people who want us to be open, who they say that they want us to be open. But then when we try to, a lot of times we're not met with that grace. We're not met with that patience. We're not met with that vulnerability, that empathy, that compassion, right? We get met with criticism. We get met with judgment, right? Anger, hostility. It's like, how dare you? How dare you share how you feel? Because if it's not whatever I think it's supposed to be, then you can just go somewhere. And again, as a man, as a father, and as a therapist, I'm like, yo, this is not the move. Like, how do we think these two are going to go together? How are you telling people you want them to feel this way and to share with you, but this is what you tell them? And again, I'm not trying to say everybody does this, but I'm talking about from a societal perspective for a lot of men that I've had the fortune to get to know, and also based on a lot of my lived experience. We are not given those spaces. And then on the contrary, culturally, for some of us, we're even taught explicitly. Somebody's telling us, hey, you don't talk about that. You keep that here. You don't, you cross the door. This is what I was told. When you, like, this is the door, right? When you cross the threshold of this door, you don't say nothing. All that stays in this house. What do you think that does to a young child? What do you think that does to a teenage boy who maybe wants to have his first girlfriend or is trying to build good relationships with other men? And someone's like, hey, how you doing? Is there any surprise that we get that same static answer like you were joking about with your dad? I'm good. Everything's good. I'm fine. Why do you think we do that? Because it's conditioning, man. We've been conditioned for so long to not be real. We've been shamed out of being honest in a lot of cases. We hear all these expressions. Don't be a girl. Stop being a wimp, right? You hear all these things that all they're doing is subtly telling you, keep your feelings to yourself because possibly we don't actually care. That's how a lot of people are receiving that. And so I'm working very, very hard to try to decouple and deprogram a lot of us that's how we see things, because it took me a really long time as well to see it in a different way.
I agree. And honestly, for me, like it was until like very recently that I was struggling with the same thing, because I had this conditioning that has been like shared with me that if you share, you're weak. If you share, you're like a wimp or whatever. The list goes on and on.
Mhm.
Once I made that shift of mindset that by being vulnerable and sharing, you're actually strong, you're actually brave, you're actually powerful,
Oh yeah.
then I was able to really take pride in my own journey and my own story. Because if you have been through hardship and you were able to get past it, continue to move forward, you are powerful, you are brave, you are magnificent. Like that's the difference. It's completely the opposite of what we're being told, that by you being vulnerable and sharing, you're weak. You're all of this stuff that's not true. You're
Yes.
actually stronger, and you're helping people understand that as well. And feel seen too, because when you share your story with people that you care about, they can see themselves within you, and they can understand. Oh, I'm not alone. I'm not. And some people even I've had conversations with people that are like, I thought I was crazy.
Yeah.
And like when they realize like, oh wait, yeah, you also feel that, like, yeah, like a lot of men do. We just don't talk about it. Like we just most, like if not all of us. So I think it's important to decide to make that that shift of mind, and remember that it's gonna take some time. Even it's not like Carlos told me this, now I'm changed. Like I heard it on the live, and now like I know that like it's hard to be vulnerable. It's hard to it takes it's let's move away from the word hard. It's challenging. It is challenging, but it does get easier the more that you do it, and the more that you share with people who actually are receptive and actually support you, and you sharing without judgment, and actually listening from love and listening to understand, not just to respond.
There you go.